The story of Colton Burpo begins not with mystery or spectacle, but with an ordinary family living an ordinary life in a small town in Nebraska. His parents worked hard, raised their children, and practiced their faith quietly. There was no expectation that their lives would ever be discussed beyond their community, let alone across the world. Colton was a bright, energetic child, deeply attached to his parents, curious about the world and still forming his understanding of it. At the age of 3, he had no theological training, no awareness of death, and no framework for concepts like heaven, resurrection, or the afterlife beyond what any young child might absorb passively. When Colton began complaining of stomach pain, it did not immediately seem serious. Children often fall ill, and early medical visits failed to reveal the severity of the situation. His parents trusted the doctors and followed instructions, unaware that time was becoming critical. As hours passed, Colton's condition worsened. He became weaker, more distressed, and increasingly unresponsive. Eventually, doctors realized that Colton's appendix had ruptured. By the time this was discovered, the infection had spread aggressively through his body. Emergency surgery was required immediately. His parents were told that the situation was life-threatening. The atmosphere shifted from concern to fear. As Colton was taken into surgery, his parents were left waiting, powerless. His father retreated to the hospital chapel, overwhelmed and praying intensely. His mother waited elsewhere, crying and afraid. Neither parent knew whether their son would survive. Colton did survive the surgery. Medically, the operation was considered a success. His recovery was slow but steady, and his parents were filled with relief. For a time, life returned to normal. There were no dramatic statements, no immediate talk of visions or experiences. Colton seemed like the same child he had always been. Months later, small comments began to emerge. They were not announced with urgency or emotion. They came casually, often during mundane moments. Colton would say things that made his parents pause, things that seemed oddly specific, oddly confident, and oddly out of place for a child his age. He spoke about the surgery. He said that while doctors were working on him, he was not in his body. He said he was watching from above. At first, his parents dismissed it as imagination. Children often play with ideas, but then he added details. He said he saw the doctors working on him. He said he saw his father in the chapel, crying and praying. He said he saw his mother in another room, overwhelmed with emotion. These were not things he had been told. His parents had intentionally avoided sharing those moments with him. When asked gentle questions, Colton did not waver. He did not hesitate. His descriptions remained simple but consistent. His parents struggled to explain how he could know these things. As time passed, Colton began speaking about heaven. He did not describe it with elaborate imagery or borrowed religious language. He spoke with the limited vocabulary of a child. Heaven, he said, was beautiful. It was filled with light. It felt safe. There was no fear there. He spoke about Jesus. He described Jesus wearing white with a sash. He said Jesus had marks on his hands and feet. He said Jesus smiled often and spoke kindly. He did not describe judgment, anger, or condemnation. What he emphasized most was warmth and love. Colton's descriptions were notable not for their drama, but for their restraint. He did not insist that others believe him. He did not frame his experience as a warning or a message. He spoke as though he were recalling something meaningful, not something meant to persuade. As conversations continued, Colton mentioned meeting family members he had never known. He spoke about his great-grandfather, who had died long before Colton was born. When shown photographs, Colton identified him without hesitation. His parents were stunned. They could not explain how he recognized someone he had never met and never seen. Then came the moment that deeply unsettled and moved the family. Colton spoke about meeting a sister in heaven. His parents were confused. They had no daughter who had died. Slowly, they realized what he meant. Colton's mother had suffered a miscarriage before Colton was born. It was a loss they had never discussed with him. Colton spoke about this sister naturally, without sadness. He described her as alive, joyful, and happy. For his parents, this moment reopened grief they had never fully processed, while also offering a sense of unexpected comfort. Colton also spoke about children in heaven, angels, and worship. He said worship was joyful. People sang because they wanted to, not because they were required to. Again, his emphasis was not on rules, structure, or fear, but on joy, love, and peace. As Colton grew older, his parents wrestled with how to understand what he was saying. His father, being a pastor, approached the situation cautiously. He understood the danger of overinterpreting personal experiences. He questioned whether Colton could have absorbed ideas from church teachings, overheard conversations, or unconsciously constructed memories. Some elements could be explained naturally. Others resisted easy explanation. What stood out most was that Colton's story did not grow more elaborate over time. It did not become more dramatic. In fact, as Colton aged, he spoke about it less, not more. Eventually, Colton's father chose to share the story publicly, believing it might comfort others who were grieving. The book that followed brought international attention. Millions read it. Many found hope in Colton's words, especially those mourning loved ones or wrestling with fear of death. At the same time, critics raised serious concerns. They pointed out that young children are highly suggestible, that memory is not fixed, that trauma can shape perception. These critiques were valid and important. The family acknowledged them openly. Colton himself never claimed certainty. As he matured, he became more reserved about the experience. He admitted that his memories had faded. He clarified that he did not remember everything clearly and did not consider himself chosen or special. He repeatedly emphasized that his experience should never replace Scripture. From a biblical perspective, this restraint is crucial. The Bible acknowledges visions and spiritual experiences, but it consistently warns against building faith on experiences alone. Discernment is emphasized. Scripture remains central. The Colton Burpo story does not offer scientific proof of heaven. It does not resolve theological debates. It does not eliminate doubt. What it offers instead is a human story, one that many find comforting, others find challenging, and most find thought-provoking. At its core, the story resonates because it touches a universal longing, the hope that love continues, that relationships are not erased, that suffering is not meaningless, that death does not have the final word. Whether you believe Colton truly experienced heaven, interpreted something shaped by trauma, or encountered something beyond easy explanation, his story invites reflection rather than certainty. It encourages humility rather than dogmatism. Perhaps that is why the story endures. Not because it proves anything beyond question, but because it speaks to something deeply human, the desire for meaning, connection, and love that lasts beyond loss. If you've stayed with this story to the end, thank you. If you find these explorations meaningful, consider subscribing for more calm, honest discussions about near-death experiences, faith, and the Bible. And I'd love to hear from you. What are your thoughts on stories like this? Do they bring comfort, raise questions, or both? Feel free to share your perspective or drop your favorite Bible verse in the comments below.